it before because it literally affects everything, but being a woman is up first. Likely as a result of the whole Pandora's Box fiasco, wherein the first human, Pandora, is gifted a jar by Zeus on her wedding night, and he doesn't tell her, hey, don't open that. There's a bunch of demons in there that will, plague mankind. Pandora pops open her wedding gift, and just like that, Greek sexism is born. Distrust of women was embedded in the ancient Greek collective psyche pretty much from the start. Gender classicist Jaron Auckland describes the Greek opinion of a woman eloquently. Irresistibly beautiful, but parasitic and lazy artifact that sits in the house of a man and eats everything. This sexism floated across the realities of civic life, where women were unable to vote, own land, or inherit property. Females were often abandoned at birth, and girls' education focused more on preparation for child rearing than intellectual stimulation. Medical was laughable, and if a woman had an ailment, she was always to blame for it. Aristotle believed and insisted that women were deformed males, created after something went wrong in the mother's womb. Hilarious, because we now know that's actually quite the reverse, and that the male sex develops after the females. Plato warned men not to turn into women when they reincarnated, best done by finding success in their incumbent lives. And even Pericles said that the best thing about a woman was that she was never spoken about. The life expectancy for an ancient Greece woman was 36, and the average for a man was 45. Currently, the life expectancy for Greek women is 82, and for men, 77. So being a hater sucks the life out of you boys. And while we ride this wave, let's talk about how adultery is worse. Worse than what? Well, literally everything to the Greek. Even worse than being taken against your will, as the Greeks didn't consider that an act of violence against a person rather than property, which is what women were to their husband or father. For that crime, you'd be fined with literal property damage. Adultery? Whoa, as a woman, you'd best bet was to gouge your eyes out so you never see someone hot and feel temptation ever again once that proverbial ring is on your finger. The Greek definition of adultery includes not only engaging with someone outside of your marriage, but also just being an unmarried woman who does the dirty and gets caught. Adultery was seen as a devastating impact on a family unit, which was a vital institute of Greek society. It undermined a household and therefore society. And if you can just undermine your whole empire for some nookie, it makes sense to the Greeks that adulterers could be killed on the spot if they're caught. Not too far of a stretch. If the caught pair contained a married woman, she was immediately and legally divorced from her husband, even if the victim husband wished to stay with her. He could also sell her into slavery if he felt like it. So while you decide what to do with her, remember you can't smoke him, but you can go get like 20 years of pent out anger out on the guy your wife swept with, because now it's your legal right to punish him with radishes. And you can only imagine where the radishes are supposed to go. And on the topic of law in ancient Greece, justice equals personal outrage. We all piss each other off. It happens. People can be abrasive, or they may have rivaling opinions, or sometimes you just talk too fast, and that's what it takes. Regardless of what you do wrong, people will deal with it and move on. If a law gets involved and is broken, there's an appropriate punishment and recourse via court, which is cordial and doesn't involve two people screaming at each other in front of a judge. But that is exactly what court justice looked like in Athens. According to punishment laws, rage was the heart of why someone was punished by society, meaning anyone could bring anything as a charge against someone else. On a hilarious note, that means about 96% of the surviving court documents from Athens features cases which revolved around how much one person just hated another and was trying to convince the court to hate that person too. Laws define just how much anger was appropriate response for certain actions, and once parties were in court, it was the prosecutor's job to make the jury feel just as angry about something so that punishment could be handed out. And that led to sort of an eye for an eye system, quite literally. So if you were unlikable in ancient Greece, best thing to do is stick to yourself. But I mean, we shouldn't be too hard on them for letting emotion bias their laws, right? Except for the fact that it happened more than once. Next up, people aren't perfect. Democracy was developed by the many ancient indigenous colonies that are found around the world, and its influence grew through history and societies. The Greeks adopted the practice of democracy, and they executed it in a way that makes them famous in history. However, even a system as revered as democracy can find itself utilized for more nefarious purposes. Best example, the Melitinian debate of 427 BC during the Peloponnesian War, when a city-state of Mytilene had attempted to separate from the Athenian Empire. The revolt failed epically, however, and the Mytileans were forced to awkwardly submit to Athens again, like a Quebec-Canada scenario. So it's up to the Athenians to decide what punitive measures to take to really teach these guys and make an example of them. According to Thucydides, it was in the fury of the moment that they decided to execute not only the prisoners they'd taken to Athens, but also the entire adult male population of Melitene, and then the women and the children, medicine would be taken into servitude. They send a boat off with these orders, but as they're watching it float away over the horizon, they maybe have it click in that their decision to pretty much burn an entire city to the ground might have been made in haste. So since they've got so much time on their hands, they issued another debate on the subject just to be sure. A new vote was taken, and it was decided that only the prime movers in the rebellion, 1,000 people, would be killed instead of 100,000 people. A second ship is sent off to catch the first and reach them at Miletus itself just seconds before the sentence is carried out. So, democracy, pros and cons. Another reason to hate living here aside from biased politics is that medical kills, because it wasn't until the 5th century BC that Greek physicians started looking at illness as something based in science. Before, the state of the human body was at the whim of the gods. So what that meant for a patient pre-science medicine is you'd visit shrines and temples and participate in rituals called temple sleep and incubation, wherein you slept at the temple, told the priest your dreams in the morning, and he'd either deem you cured or recommend you just do this again. And yeah, if you die, I guess. I don't know. Then, when science medicine came along, you needed 0 certification to advertise being a physician. Quite simply, medicine in ancient Greece was based around the idea that the human body was composed of a range of fluids. A good doctor was supposed to know each of these separate fluids, what they looked like and what they tasted like, and that's it. Feel sick? Yak in a cup, let your doctor take a swig, and he'll tell you what he thinks is up. Hippocrates said healthy urine should taste like fig juice. One less juice I am now going to try and lice. Unsurprisingly, treatments were just as disgusting as these ancient methods of diagnostics. In most cases, a doctor would prescribe a session of bloodletting to drain the body of bad blood, and anything wrong with a woman could be solved with meal dung mixed into wine. Yum. But their methods certainly might have been disgusting. Written histories from the time often make mention of people living beyond the age of 100, so maybe they were onto something. Number 5 is the dirty gal. And sadly, it is so not in a fun way, rather the opposite. For some wild reason, the Greeks believed women had a really unique susceptibility to the things deemed impure. This is everything gross you could think of. So pus, feces, discharges and secretions, animal dung, rotten foods, the whole shebang. These things affected women in a way they did not affect men. Sure, it didn't mean she was more easily grossed out by it, but it also must mean that it's better for her. So naturally, literal filth became part of the treatments for ladies. One awful example is how a woman suffering from a discharge could be prescribed to drink roasted mule dung mixed with hot wine. If you lost your baby amidst that tragedy, they'd be rubbing cow dung all over you. If you've seen some of our medieval videos, you may have heard about the whole wandering womb concept of the olden times, where people believed that a womb could just wander around inside a woman's body or just vacate it entirely as if it's got little legs. Well, anyways, the whole reason for the cow dung thing is they believe that the womb would be so disgusted by the smell of dung that it would run away and relieve her of the trauma. And so the tradition for terrible, filthy medicine for the women of Greece carried on for centuries. Number 4 is another questionable medical tradition: plan sneeze. So this is the fault of one dude specifically. Unlike Estrastratus, he didn't get his name banned forever, however. So Greek physician Sonaris was one of the best women's physicians you could find. No concept of how a woman's body worked and full confidence that he did. Perfect combo. He pitched that if women didn't want to get pregnant after, doing it, they should squat, sneeze, and rinse, and just like that, you're pregnancy immune. Well, word spread of this method that allowed people to avoid weird olden contraceptives and not get preggers, so tons of people did it and tons of people got pregnant. Unfortunately, word of it not working did not spread as fast as the rumor that it did, and this tactic carried on in many regions of Greece for decades. Don't worry, Sonaris had a couple backup ideas. He also suggested rubbing honey or cedar resin on your hoo-ha before getting down, which was probably entirely too efficient between the mess and the burning sensation, making people just call it quits on the act altogether for a while. Number 3 is before he cheats. Hold off on the baseball bat and the keys, Carrie. The Greeks got this one covered. Infidelity was a huge no-no and was even classified as a crime in ancient Greek customs. This went on for both men and women. If you were to be called before the courts and found guilty of this act, there were a few punishments, none of which maimed or ended your life. No. They were quite unique. One of the most common was to insert peeled ginger root into the genital orifice of a man or a woman. This would cause intolerable burning sensation and pain to the intimate parts of the unfaithful. Another one was to have the pubic hair on your derriere burnt off with smoldering ash, which sounds just... another option was a radish that had small holes in it pushed in your back door, which would be very itchy and very burny. Yeah, suffice to say, cheating on your partner back then wouldn't result in getting your stuff tossed out on the front lawn or your PS5 drowned, more so in a seriously ingrained lesson on commitment via vegetable. Number 2 is the Phalic Festival. Huzzah! The time has come for us all to gather in the Acropolis and gaze down on the wondrous sight of if you're a visitor, sure, your reaction may be one of shock, but to the people of Athens, this tradition was highly cultivated and something people looked forward to year-round. Once a year, their roads would come alive with all kinds of depictions and representations of male genitalia. This happened during the annual Dionysus celebration, a god of pleasure and wine, where men and women would march down the streets holding giant phalli proudly above their heads as a tribute to their gods, all while drunk out of their minds and on their way in a phallic procession to the temple of Dionysus. According to Aristotle, phallic processions were the birthplace of comedic theater. He claimed that people adapted the jokes they'd yell during the parade processions into full stage plays. So if Aristotle's right, all comedy began with the Greeks carrying giant cartoony dongs. And it's number 1. The axe did it. Projection, everyone's favorite guilt relief. This fable begins when the Athenians sacrificed foods and vegetables to the gods, not animals. Ironically, this is how they start. An altar for Zeus had been set up holding grains and cakes as a sacrifice, and when a wandering ox came across the altar, it trampled much of it and ate the sacrificial food. Well, like I previously mentioned, their gods were very real to them, and a man named Phalic, in anger, then killed the ox with an axe. Phalic was the first Athenian in the city to have killed an ox, and he fled, leaving the axe behind at the crime scene. The witnesses to the scene were shocked by the event and moved to prosecute Phalic for the murder of the ox. Despite his absence, they held a trial to charge Phalic, but it still didn't resolve the sense of communal responsibility for the murder of an ox going on without justice. An oracle spoke up, telling the Athenians they should eat the ox in a feast and repeat the sacrifice every year to compensate. So the next year, a group of ox were to be led to the original altar. Whatever one ate from the altar, that was the one to be killed. He was struck with an axe and then killed by a member of the Athenian family, who would then throw the axe down and run away just like their ancestor. The other participants in the ritual then butchered and skinned the animal with a sacrificial knife and feasted on the meat. This could not be the end of the ritual, however, because a crime had been committed. The ox had been slain, just like before, so it's back to square one with another trial. Since the ox slayer had to flee, the girls who brought the water for sharpening the weapon were charged. Their defense was that those who actually sharpened the axe and knife were more responsible. The sharpeners in turn charged the man who gave them the axe and knife, and then that guy, he charged the butcher. But the butcher claimed the knife was more guilty because it did the cutting, and since the knife could say nothing in its defense, it was found guilty. And then the knife was banished by being thrown into the sea. To conclude this bizarre ritual, back on Acropolis, the skin of the ox was stuffed, stood up, and harnessed to a plow, restoring it to its pre-sacrificial condition. And so they did this every year for centuries. The end.
Number 10. The classic. Alexander the Great is probably the most infamous person on this list. Shout out again to my late 90s PC gamers, but because of Age of Empires and Civilization games, you are probably familiar with old Alexander, one of the great conquerors of ancient times. So what does that mean exactly? Well, the man wasn't asking for land with please and thank you. He was asking with a spear and a shield sort of style. And by asking, I mean just taking. However, for the brutal, handsome young king of many lands, his time to bask in his empire was short-lived, as he died soon after Persia was conquered. His achievements cannot be understated, however. Conquering so much at such a young age was very impressive, comparative to the mythological Achilles in grandeur. Number 9. A man in his barrel. This is going to be very difficult to talk about, simply because I find the premise of this to be comedy gold. Okay, close your eyes. Imagine ancient Greece. A city like Athens is populated with the wealthy in gowns and robes, and maybe even a stereotypical toga. Buildings of white stone and marble. A market bustling with people haggling for fresh produce and cloth. Perhaps even a fountain with some flowers. Beautiful, isn't it? However, just around the corner, not too far from the town square, there's a barrel. A barrel that's shaking vigorously. And what is causing this barrel to shake? Well, that would be the man who lives in it, Diagonies. Yes, a philosopher who was self-gratifying himself in a barrel in public. Diogenes defended his behavior by saying how he wished it was as easy to relieve hunger by rubbing an empty stomach. Yeah, I was sitting in my study earlier when a courier handed me a letter. I opened the letter in a warm candlelight glow. It was from the chief. And he said that's not it. Number 8, trendsetter. As if doing what Diogenes did in public wasn't bad enough, and I mean, come on, that's pretty scandalous, he also would commonly defecate in public theaters and urinate on those he found annoying. Sure, maybe major cities need people like this. I mean, come on, would New York City really be New York City if crazy people don't yell at you on the streets all the time? Huh? Diogenes just may have been the first to do such crazy things. Also, I'd like to argue his philosophy. If you just give me a moment, if he pees on people who are annoying him, could the people that are being peed on not deem that annoying and then do the same in return? I'm not a smart guy like the Greek leaders, but at least I know how to use a washroom. Just saying. Number 7, high fashion. I say if you got it, flaunt it. Humbly, of course. Maybe a nice pair of shoes, your favorite pants, or for me, a brand new suit that makes me feel gorgeous, baby, yeah. But for the most part, I shop at Walmart. Let's be honest, I don't have that kind of money for the Gucci flip-flops down to the socks. However, for the great Greek philosophers like Socrates, they were wealthy enough to enjoy a literal finer cut of cloth. Yes, they could, but Socrates said no. I want the peasant look, please. Apparently, the wise Greek man often didn't wear shoes and always wore the same ratty coat. It's also said that Socrates wasn't exactly a good looker. Put on some shoes though, that'd be rough. You're walking around all day with no shoes on? Oh, those would be rough looking feet, buddy. Number 6, smart streaker. Anyone that's ever spent time with a physics professor has probably heard the story 100 times, and that professor probably genuinely thinks this is a funny story. Archimedes, the famed Greek philosopher, made a strange discovery. Strangely, one night after a long day of hard thinking, he went to take a bath. Pondering the questions of life, he noticed something was happening in the tub. No, not his rubber ducky going missing, but rather a simple yet interesting concept of displacement. When he was submerged in the water rose. He deducted that if he measures the difference, that would equal his weight of volume. And if it works with an old man, then it would work with other things as well. He was so excited by this that he shot up and ran outside screaming, "Eureka! Eureka!" Well, that part may not have happened, but if it did, I'd hate to be his neighbor. No one wants to see that, man. Number 5, Flay. This is straight up a crime, man. I don't care what you say. This is just a crime against humanity. I'm not here debating on how governments get rid of their, let's say, more interesting members of society, but this is not it. Popular in the ancient world for whatever reason, and I can't stress this enough, I would faint from watching. I was shivering writing this, seriously, it's the worst. This is the act where someone is skinned alive. They're held down and peeled back like a potato. There's multiple famous incidents like in art and mythology. I just don't know who sits there in one day and goes, you know what, this guy? Yeah, we gotta skin this guy. Let's just skin him. Let's cut him up. Let's go. Number 4, the eagle dropping turtle. Okay, here we are. Top of the food chain. We're in charge. I'd like to make the argument it's not the things we eat that puts us there, but it's the things we don't eat. Think of all the animals at your favorite local Chinese buffet. Well, we as humans have adapted so much that we can survive and choose not to be carnivores or eat certain animals. Where am I going with this? Well, despite us being number 1, sometimes the animal kingdom fights back. That's kind of how it works. Take Aeschylus in 455 BC, for example, a philosopher who found himself being struck by an eagle dropping a turtle onto his head. Unfortunately, the injury was fatal. Since we're talking about Greeks and philosophy, let's bring in a little law here. This is good, you'll like this. Mens rea, actus rea. While the eagle certainly didn't know he was committing a crime, he still did do it. Sounds like someone needs to go to animal court. That's something they would probably do back then. I mean, they did in medieval times. They put animals on court, so why not back then? Number 3, Draco. No, not Malfoy. Not Draco Malfoy. I know you're all thinking it. That's what I thought too. Draco, the lawgiver of ancient Greece, was a man with modern solutions for their modern problems. He was asked to give a code of law to replace the very aged tribal feuding laws that still existed at the time. Commoners were shocked to find out that even trivial crimes could wind you up in the Brazen Bull, or not breathing anymore. Uh-oh. However, the wealthy, of course, loved these laws and applauded Draco. Classic villain story. They really loved it, so much so that it was Draco's undoing. As the legend goes, Draco was buried in a small mountain of clothes, hats, and garments. He suffocated under the pile of compliments. The accidental fatality of the man who gave us strict laws that are fatal. So what do you charge? You get in trouble for undoing the guy that's supposed to undo? That's weird. I don't know. Number 2, Prometheus. Oh, mighty Prometheus, what wise knowledge of fire do you bring us today? The story of Prometheus is that of a very dark and tragic one. He was the god who gave humans fire, despite Zeus's wishes not to. Well, given Zeus's temper, he wasn't too pleased when he saw people grilling up their Slovaki. Love me some Slovaki, man. Naturally, Prometheus had to pay, so Zeus did something so awful to him, well, we still talk about it today. He had Prometheus chained to a rock where every day at the same time a large bird would come down and eat his innards. Just come and just nom nom on his insides. Gross. Since he was a god, he had Wolverine-like healing abilities, but he wasn't immune to pain. It would still hurt. He'd heal every day, but it would hurt really, really bad. Number 1, Sisyphus. I think this one is relatable to everyone, including myself. Unless, of course, a large bird does rip your guts out from time to time, or you've been skinned alive, then that one's more relatable. I doubt that, though. Sisyphus was the king of Corinth and had cheated his meeting with the Grim Reaper one too many times. This made Zeus mad. So he sent in Sisyphus to push a boulder up a mountain forever. Every time he gets to the top, it just falls back down. And if that's not a metaphor for life, I don't know what is. Number 10, stone toilet paper. It's been said that only 2 things in life are certain: not living and taxes. However, I think a third point needs to be added, and that's everybody goes number 2. It's a part of life. You eat, your body takes in its nutrients, and then it gets rid of the waste. That's the cycle of life. It's kind of beautiful, actually. Then we all have to use an invention that I know we're all thankful for: toilet paper. But have you ever wondered what people of ancient times did? I know I do. After all, there was no Walmartius to purchase Greco Papyrus Rolleus, or the Greek staple that is olive oil. Trust me, that'll come into play later. Well, the answer, my friend, is very simple. Even simpler than the 3 seashells, and everybody knows how to use them. Cleansing stones. Yes, that's right. Smooth, rounded stones, just for the occasion. My mom always joked around about using newspapers like some folks did in the old days, but stones, they actually use stones to do that part. A little too rough for my Gerber baby bottom, if you will. No thank you. No. Mom, I was a Gerber baby. Number 9, painted statues. When you close your eyes and think of ancient Greece, what do you imagine? Oh yes, I'm just imagining it right now. Beautiful coastline cities with harbors bustling full of ships carrying fresh fish and cargo, men and women flocking the brick streets and markets. White marble monuments surround the city like clouds of opulence, and the statues of pure white marble depicting Greek gods and myths of yonder. Sounds great, right? Well, what if I told you that not all these beautiful white statues that you could see in museums were pure white marble as we know them today? Yes, that's right. Greek marble statues had color. They were painted with the best and brightest colors they had at the time. It's only with time that the color has faded. Some people want to repaint only after a few short years. Try a couple thousand. Number 8, beef up. Gotta get the gains, gotta get swole so your Discord crush will send you the heart emojis and ooh-oohs that you so desire. I'm sorry, that's so cringe, I'm so sorry. At least that's how I'm told romance works these days. Romance might have changed, but working out has not. The ancient Greeks worked out to maintain a peak athletic performance. That's right, brother. However, it wasn't exactly treadmills and pumping iron. One Greek athlete's training involved carrying a cow calf around all day until the calf reached adulthood. Pretty cool. This is all done naked, by the way, though, and slathered in olive oil. Not so cool. Athletes also ate their fair share to keep up with all the working out they did. Some cases up to 10 pounds of meat and bread a day. Talk about beefy boys. That's right, brother. Number 7, one night sneeze. We've all been there. It was a hot summer night. You went out with a couple of friends for girls' night. Tonight is all about the ladies. No guys, you say to each other. And now you're in the club and drinks are flowing. And that's when you see him. He's tall, handsome, and has blue eyes. You're smitten. Hours later, you find yourself under the sheets up to the neck like it's a primetime sitcom. The sun peers its way through curtains that haven't been cleaned since he bought them, and yes, that's right, that's a one-night stand. They happen, and sometimes people just want to have a little fun. Can you blame them? I can't. What I'm getting at is sometimes nights like those can have an 18-year investment after a 9-month down payment, if you catch my drift. The ancient Greeks had a simple solution for ladies who weren't interested in that kind of bargain. Sneeze. Yes, sneeze. Achoo! Sneeze. Sneeze away the night of Cinco de Mayo tequila shots at a bar called O'Grady's. The Greeks believed if you sneezed a whole bunch, you couldn't get preggers. Simple. Just simple. All you can do is sneeze, dude. Simple. Number 6. Tasteful doctor. As humans today, we have a lot of knowledge in the medical field, and we're only getting smarter. Who knows what we'll be capable of in 100 years? Kind of amazing to think about. Well, despite the technology that the Greeks did not possess, any college professor today will tell you that they were not stupid. They weren't. We owe a lot to them. Part of that is in the medical field. For example, urine tests. A lot can be told about a person from their urine. The Greeks knew this, but they didn't have all that fancy schmancy machines to tell them what was in their urine. Instead, they did the next best thing and tasted the forbidden lemonade in order to determine what was wrong with the patient. Sure, you can tell a lot by that way too, but if the person was sick, well, you know how that goes. Let's keep the lemonade in the cups, please. Yes, I believe. Yes, you have something wrong with your liver.
At number 5, democracy? Though the Greeks are often credited with the creation of democracy, much like anything else in this world, it has a dark history. One of injustice and bloodshed. Back in the days of ancient Greece and in the relatively early days of democracy, this political practice could sometimes be used for nefarious purposes. One of the best examples of that comes from the Mytilean debate of 427 BC. Basically what happened here is that during the Peloponnesian War, the city-state of Mytilene tried to free itself from the influence of Athens. Their revolt ultimately failed, and the citizens of the city-state were subjected to a severe punishment. They decided to not only execute the prisoners that they'd taken to Athens, but also the entire adult male population, and women and children were sold into slavery. The vote to put a stop to Mytilene weighed heavily on the minds of those who voted for this outcome, so they later staged another vote, ultimately choosing to only punish those who were directly involved in the city's revolt. At number 4, crime and punishment. Earlier I mentioned one of the gruesome ways that people were punished in ancient Greece, but let me tell you some more about their ways of crime and punishment. The standard form of executing prisoners was by performing what was called a bloodless crucifixion. Basically, the convicted individual would, quote, be fastened to a board by the wrists and ankles, and a collar around the neck would be tightened gradually to strangle them to death. End quote. If an execution had to take place on a battlefield, the accused would be beheaded, but if given the option, you could sometimes avoid a violent death by instead choosing to ingest poison on your own terms. If you committed a crime and were able to avoid execution, then you would be exiled. If your crime was bad enough to be banished from your community, then your name and crime would be inscribed somewhere so that no one forgot what you did, meaning that your crime would be known for the rest of time. At number 3, this is Sparta. As you could imagine, childhood during ancient times was certainly no easy cakewalk, but one of the worst upbringings in ancient Greece had to go to the young citizens of Sparta. Just to give you an idea of how life might have been as a Spartan, just think about the fact that it was literally written into law that Spartans had to be, quote, fearless, ruthless, and disciplined above all else. End quote. Back then, a young Spartan boy would only grow up with his parents until he was 7 years old, which at this point he would then be sent to a military camp run by the state, where he would stay until he turned 30. Young Spartans were taught mostly about fighting, perfecting the art of combat, and would spend very little time learning math and music. These kids were taught to be ruthless, stealing for their survival, and not showing any fear towards their enemies. At number 2, ostracism. In Athens, back during ancient Greece, ostracism was a common aspect of political life. Back then, the citizens would evaluate the performance of their politicians. They would then vote on who didn't serve them well or who they didn't like, and the citizens would write the name of said person on a piece of broken pottery. The person who gained the most votes from the public would then be exiled from Athens for 10 years. Unfortunately, this was kind of a flawed system, and any clever politician would then be able to use this ostracism vote in order to get rid of their rival. After Athenians figured out the flaw in their system, their ostracism votes were later ended. And finally, at number 1, sacrifice. At this point, after learning about so many ancient civilizations, I think it's safe to assume that basically every civilization had their sacrifices. Human sacrifices, I mean. It's been theorized that perhaps the ancient Greeks were participating in such practices because back in 2016, the remains of a teenager were found on Mount Lycaon, which appeared to have been, quote, a product of ritual sacrifice, end quote. It is thought that perhaps this person was meant to serve as a sacrifice to the god Zeus. On top of that, there has also been pieces of ancient literature that depicts the sacrificing individuals in the same area that those remains were found. We don't know for certain if this kind of ritual was part of everyday life or if it was just a one-off type deal.
Number 10, it's Happy Name Day to you. Birthdays are basic and boring. Here in ancient Greece, we practice name days, a celebration of your birth title. In ancient Greece, names were deemed incredibly important and were given in a way meant to ideally define what a person would be like and grow to be. A great example is Aristotle, a compound name with Aristos meaning best and telos meaning end. Pretty fitting and ironic for someone who would become the best philosopher of the time and also have a pretty not great end. Anyways, this importance of names meant that every name had its own special day in the calendar. So instead of celebrating your exit of the womb, you'd wait for whatever day was your given one and coincided with your name, and that's what you'd celebrate. Name days aren't just in Greek culture and can be found in ones such as Eastern Europe and the Balkan regions, and some still celebrate name day to this day. Some of us still get phone calls from angry aunts wondering why they weren't wished happy name day on Facebook. Since it rhymes with wine, number 9 is water it down. We know that many ancient civilizations didn't drink water due to how polluted it was. Whether that pollution was salt or feces, well, it varied. Anyways, while many drank beer, the Greeks drank wine. However, drinking alcohol at every time of the day doesn't mean that there's a free pass to be drunk. Quite the opposite actually, as heavy drinking and drunkenness was looked down upon and seen as an embarrassment. This is because the Greeks associated it with barbarism, and many of their gods and their pantheons' behaviors and stories also attributed to this. Wine without water was only used as medicine for sick or during travel as a tonic. As a result, the Greeks may have been pounding back the wine, but it was water diluted ratio, so the standard was 1:4. They even had a special container for mixing, boiling, and then cooling this diluted mixture. Oh, and by the way, it was seawater they were using, because apparently, to quote, seawater gives the wine a curious salinity which mixes with the sweetness of the grape and produces a delicate taste, while at the same time preserving the wine for longer. Number 8 is He Who Must Not Be Named. This is one of the pettiest and most specific ones you'll probably ever hear, and it's all because one dude screwed up so phenomenally it started an actual tradition. So what happened here was there was this Greek shepherd named Erostratus, and this guy had an idea one day to, set fire to and destroy the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. So keep in mind, he did this in an era where the Greeks revered their gods the way that modern day religions like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc. do. These gods are real to them, so why would they destroy her temple? Which, by the way, is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world in our modern time. When pissed off Greeks came and found him to ask that same question, Erostratus essentially said his only intention in doing this was to achieve fame and his name to go on into history, the way that Alexander or Achilles had. He didn't care if it was in a good or a bad way, he just wanted that. Well, the entirety of Greece collectively said F that once his intentions were revealed. Mentioning his name or naming children Erostratus was forbidden at the risk of being sentenced to death penalty, and so it became tradition that no one in Greece was to have that name. Number 7 is Don't Open Dead Outside. In traditional Grecian lore, it was said that there was these walking dead as creatures. Legend forewarns that these creatures would rise from the graves at night to knock on the door of innocent civilians, saying their names repetitively as a lure to open up, as these creatures, kinda in a vampire fashion, have to be invited in. If you didn't answer your door on the first knock, you were safe and no harm could come to you. However, if people were unfortunate enough to answer, they would die after a few days and then would be transformed into one of these creatures themselves. This is why the Greeks had a tradition, arguably even a superstition, that you should never answer the door on the first knock. Many still follow this tradition to date. Number 6, you don't want to be the bigger man. We've all seen the Grecian statues, whether in photo format or lucky enough to see them in galleries or in the countries themselves. But what we can all agree on is there's one added appendage that's hard to avoid noticing. Or is it? You may have noticed on male statues from ancient Greece that while they include his private regions, they are noticeably quite well, small on every single statue. Well, this is a tradition that actually has an explanation that's nothing to do with shrinkage. In ancient Greece, a small package was actually coveted and seen as the pinnacle of male form. This is because it was consistently depicted in their lore that being well endowed was something for the mundane or barbarians. So traditionally in ancient lore, only foolish males ruled by lust had large, well, you get the idea. Finally, an explanation for the question we've all thought, nobody said out loud.
Number 5. Statue of Zeus. Another one of the ancient wonders of the world. The statue of Zeus was a giant seated figure depicting the almighty Greek boy at 41 feet tall. Made by the Greek sculptor Phidias around 435 BC, built inside the temple of Zeus. The statue was made of gold and ivory, totally non-opulent resources, ornamented with ebony, ivory, and more gold. Can never have enough. However, it was lost during the 5th century, and really the only details we know about it are from the ancient Greek descriptions and representations on coins. When I pass, hopefully I'll have left enough comedy for the world to enjoy. Maybe I'll get an opulent statue too. Just no ivory though, that's cruel. So maybe we'll go for like an all maple wood statue or something since I'm Canadian. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Maybe like nickel for Sudbury or something, I don't know, something like that. Number 4. Constitution of Athens. The Declaration of Independence. Can you get a more important artifact from the past that shows how things worked? The playbook on democracy and freedom. God bless America. That bad boy is locked up tight. It's important. Just make sure Nicolas Cage isn't anywhere near it. Well, the Constitution of Athens was equally as important, but well, it wasn't Nicolas Cage, but we did lose it. Parts of it were recovered from a papyrus in the late 1800s, but more confusing than that is there seems to be 2 of them. For some reason. It doesn't seem to be a copy either. One possibly a student of Socrates or perhaps one of Zenos. Truth is, we're not sure, and that's why it's on this list. At least we know John Hancock signed the Declaration of Independence. Put a big old signature right there. And now we know, and it's locked up. Nicolas Cage can't get it. Number 3. Pythagoras. A squared plus B squared equals C or something like that. Or as Google calls it, the square of the longest side of a right triangle is equal to the sum of the squares of the remaining 2 shorter sides. Pretty sure I heard my math teacher talk about that once, but it's not that important, right? I'm not doing much math, and my high school math teachers. I digress. I shouldn't be mean because she was actually one of the best teachers I ever had. The subject sucked, but she was great. Shout out to Miss Savage, you're the best. It seems the life and work of Pythagoras are somewhat of a mystery, to the point where, well, it's like third-hand information, and that's never good. A lot of him is told through that of Romans, which is then told through Germanic tales of him, so really, we're just not 100% sure. But his math survived, so maybe there is some truth to it. Who knows? He made it to my math class, so. Number 2, Homer. Known as an overweight American family dad who resides in an unknown state at 742 Evergreen Terrace. Just kidding, we're talking about the smart Homer, who arguably wrote 2 of the best literatures ever, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Some historians believe that Homer may not have actually existed though, and just like his yellow counterpart. There are some that think perhaps Homer was just a writer's name and it was actually a teamwork of actual writers who composed the work. It doesn't change the work, but well, we'll probably just never know. Number 1, Lost Island. Greeks seem to have a knack for losing islands in the ocean. Atlantis and now this. Today in what is just off the coast of the Dilkali Peninsula was the island of Argonusa and the city of Cain. Philosopher Xenophon talks of the city and its battles. However, if you look there now, you would not find very much, as the island has sunk and the city is gone. It's kind of hard to live underwater, we're not fish. Now in its place is the peninsula. A team of archaeologists in 2015 declared this was the site of Cain after discovering evidence of an ancient harbor. Ottoman maps depict the island being sunk as early as the 1600s. Look at that, you learn something every day here. Look at that. Number 10, Tyrants. This is where the name comes from, folks, so we kind of wouldn't have the label if it weren't for ancient Greeks. There's been a lot of tyrants in history, but this is where it all starts. A tyrant refers to an absolute leader who uses his or her power harshly and crudely, exercising total control and oppressing those who stand against the strict rulings or are a desired target of which. Ooh, very fancy definition, Chetty, I like it, wow. The trick is seeing how history remembers you. Leaders like Pol Pot and Joseph Stalin are easily agreeable tyrants, but for example, the ancient Greek leader Alexander the Great can also be considered one. History remembers him for his great triumphs, and while that's interesting to look at because, well, he's one of history's greatest generals, he's really amazing actually. For the safety of our history class, that's fine, but his actual deeds, well, they were less than remarkable. War, looting, trading, YouTube's least favorite S-word, and well, many more brutal things that the conqueror from another land did. Not good. Plus, if you were from another land and you saw him do what he was doing, you probably wouldn't think he was such a great guy. It wouldn't be Alexander the Great, it'd be Alexander the Big Stinky Tyrant. So, there you go. Number 9, Diogenes. This one's my favorite. Maybe the least famous of all philosophers, but one with a decent philosophy, or at least so I think so. That's how I feel, and I think it fits in with the modern world. A man who was banished and exiled and had all his possessions stripped away. In some depictions, even his clothes. I wouldn't want that taken away. I gotta have my clothes. Thus, the man was forced to live his life on the streets of Athens, inside a barrel, as you do. This likely is what developed his philosophy of cynicism. He argued that since he was living free of tax or payment in his barrel, that he was truly free. Thus, he had less worries than the commoners, and yeah, that's where his freedom came from. Well, where does the crime part come in? Besides, well, the obvious tax fraud there, and we're gonna pay your taxes. Diogenes might have been a few gyros short of a picnic, if you know what I'm saying, as he would often shout at passers-by, and well, he would do the devil's bedroom dance solo. In public, just in his barrel there, just doing, yeah, I can't say it, but you know what I'm talking about. Number 8, Sith Revenge. While I know a lot of people would be behind this, especially for really awful crimes, revenge is not the Jedi way. Sometimes it was an option for the families of those who were wronged in ancient Greece to enact their revenge on the crook, assuming of course the crook was caught. You can just imagine the kind of crimes, the really bad ones. YouTube won't let me say. However, the important point here is that the families of the victim were given a chance to make their peace, or well, whatever the antithesis of that is, usually involving the crook not breathing anymore. Kind of a blood for blood kind of thing. Sounds great at first, but I couldn't recommend it. I don't think it would go well in people's conscience. I don't know, not a good idea. Number 7, Exile. A classic of the old world. Just like Hellenic society itself, a common punishment for a severe enough crime was banishment. Sure, today there's lots of folks who like being alone. I swear most of the people I went to high school with were introverts. I was friends with all of them. I don't know why though, because I'm so extroverted. For example, Heraclitus of Ephesus. He was getting banished from ancient Greece, and it's a lot different than not being invited to Chad's birthday party. However, getting banished back then could likely see you with nothing, like previously mentioned before. Maybe not as bad or down bad as previously mentioned, like Diogenes, but still pretty rough. There were lots wrong with ancient cities, sure, but you were much safer in civilization than left outside of it back then. As someone who's seen a lot of Bear Grylls, I wouldn't recommend going out of the wild back then. A trip, fall, a cut, that's it. Whew. Number 6, the Brazen Bull. This one is a punishment and a crime. 2 in 1, baby. The Brazen Bull to many may just look like a statue, and worst case Ontario, maybe the horns are sharp and could hurt you. Maybe. But don't be fooled, friends. This is much more than a statue of bronze or brass colored bull. It's actually a perp cooker. It's a twisted, awful, rotten form of punishment that could also be a crime itself. One against humanity, and those are the worst ones. Basically, you open the hatch on the bull and throw your bad guy in. Then, get a nice big fire going, really big one. The same ones your dad does in the summer. You know the ones you can't even get too close to because it's too hot. Woo! Then, wait. Once steam or whatever horrible smelling vapors come through the bull's nose, that's when you know the perp is done and it's time to throw in another one. That's awful. What an awful way to go. Oh. Number 5, Sisyphus. Oh baby, do I feel this one. Story of my life, honestly, day late and a dollar short. Some of you folks at home may also share the same fate as me and this chiseled Greek man doomed for eternity. This one is also one of my favorites. Basically, Sisyphus was cheating the devil. Cheating death itself, actually. After sliming his way out of the underworld one too many times, Big Daddy Zeus had to intervene. Also, when I say I relate to him, it's not because I'm a trickster who cheats my demise or cheats the devil or Hades. I'll explain. So, after Sisyphus had done what he'd done, Zeus sentenced him to roll a giant boulder up a hill for eternity. When he gets to the top, she rolls back down to the bottom and he has to start all over again every day for the rest of time. Not just life, or time. Sometimes in life it feels like you're on a grind and you work and work and work, and sometimes you go right back to square one no matter how hard you work. That sucks and that can be exhausting, but never give up because Chetty ain't and neither should you. Number 4, King Midas. The lesson in this one, folks, is to be careful what you wish for. King Midas was being granted a wish. He wished for anything I touch be turned to gold. Now, I'm not an economist because I already have too many jobs on the internet, but you can imagine how at today's rate of gold, how wealthy you would be. Sheesh! Yeah, gold was valuable back then, but now, wowie woo. So his wish was granted, and everything he touched turned to gold, which, for a good couple hours, must have been the most fun anyone has ever had, ever. Dude was seeing drachma signs. However, this wealthy gift he had been given quickly turned into a curse, or a burden. Everything he touched turned to gold. That included his food. Because of this, he starved. To fix this burden, he bathed in a river, and it said that's why gold can be found in that river. I wouldn't mind having that power myself, but if I made food gold, or even worse, what if I made my beer gold? Number 3, Narcissus. This one's in the name. Basically, there was a guy named Narcissus, and he was gorgeous. Like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Ryan Reynolds gorgeous, all put together. Oh. And he knew it, and he loved his image. Now, as a guy who goes on camera every day, naturally, you hate yourself. You hate your self-image. That's how it goes. Ask anyone here, they would tell you the same thing. But also, as someone who's on camera every day and funny from time to time, you kind of like yourself on camera, and you kind of like your self-image. It's a very strange relationship we have. However, no one is as bad as it comes to as Narcissus. One day in the forest, he came across a body of water where he saw his reflection cast, and it was so handsome, so gorgeous, that he couldn't look away. Ever. Hence the name Narcissist, or Narcissist. Or what most girls in high school find out what their boyfriends have. Narcissism. Ladies, let me know. Have you ever dated someone who has narcissism or looked in the mirror too long? Let me know, I'm curious. Number 2, Medusa. I feel like a lot of people know this one. Medusa, the half beautiful lady, half head of snakes in her head, and half monster thing with powers. Yes, I realize that was 3 halves and that doesn't add up, but you're talking to a guy who was voted class clown in the high school yearbook and not voted most likely to succeed in math. Because I just wouldn't. But she was the Gorgon monster who would turn men into stone. I do know that. If they looked into her eyes. That wasn't until your boy Perseus showed up like Link with the mirror shield and gave her a taste of her own medicine. What's the lesson on this one? I'm not sure. Maybe it's don't be so sure of your abilities. Maybe it's seeing things through. Or maybe it's having an extensive knowledge of tactics from a late 90s Nintendo character. That you never know when you're going to need that. You never know. I know that stuff. That can come in handy. Number 1, Pandora's Box. I know you guys know this one, but this one is so simple. At first glance, it's not about turning things into gold or weird snakehead ladies or giants rising from beneath the earth to fight each other. It's a box. Something ain't good in that box, but it's just a box. So don't open it. I'm gonna say it again because there's gonna be people in the comment section that are gonna say, but Chetty, because you said don't open it, that means I really wanna open it. Imagine I'm Robert De Niro telling you not to open it. Nope, no way. Nope, not gonna happen. Nope, null and void. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's how you know I'm serious, because I did a bad impression. Oh great, somebody opened it. Yes, that's right, Pandora's box was opened and it said that all the evils of the world were released from the box. Good tale, good moral, but who the heck thought putting all those evil things in the world in the box was a great idea? Whatever happened to just having memento boxes? You know, you open up a thing like this is the time I farted on camera, this is the time I went to the cottage, you know what I mean? Whatever happened to that? Okay, we're gonna finish off with some comments today. I love reading comments, you guys are so awesome. Crazy Alley Cat 247 said, love the name by the way, my friend and her brother went to Pompeii and took photos. Oh my gosh, were those photos awesome to look at? That's a reference to the Ancient Cities video. Yes, Pompeii is beautiful. That is one of the places, there's a few, I would love to travel at some point in my life, and Pompeii is absolutely on that list. I think it's an amazing, it's a well-preserved ancient city, as well as much as we've uncovered, and a lot of cool history there, as maybe a history guy, and just, and who doesn't, it's beautiful, Mediterranean, it's beautiful. Okay, Joseph Walker said, looks like I'm not the only one enjoying your company. Thank you. You are funny as hell. Thank you again. You can make gross boils farts, even boiling someone freaking funny. But I watch all you guys and turn my friends on your channels. Keep the laughs and knowledge coming. Thank you very much, Joseph Walker. Thank you. A compliment for me, a compliment for everybody. You're just like Oprah handing them out, dude. Everybody is getting a compliment. I love that. I'm so glad you're enjoying the content, and I'm glad you think I'm funny. That's good. That's a good thing. As a comedian, I like that. That's we like that. Okay, and finally, Erica Russell said, looking really good up there, Andrew. Thank you. I love it when you talk nerdy to me. Yes, Chad, that Pokemon joke you made totally landed with me. I wasn't sure if the Pokemon joke was gonna land, but I'm glad it landed with somebody. So thank you, Erica Russell, because sometimes you gotta commit to the jokes, and sometimes I don't know if it's funny. But I did fart, and that made Chris laugh, so.
At number 10, spicy defense. Usually when you think about wars from ancient times, you think of swords, spears, bows, and arrows as being the primary weapons used to fight, but that wasn't entirely the case with the ancient Greeks. It turns out that their warfare was a lot more advanced than you'd think. The ancient Greeks were actually known to have used chemical warfare as part of their defense. They were known to use poison-tipped arrows and incendiary weapons. The earliest example of such a thing in ancient Greece comes from the siege of Plataea in 429 BC, when Spartan soldiers set fire to a wood pile with sulfur, releasing sulfur dioxide gas into the air and forcing the opposing force to flee their positions. According to other accounts, they may have also poisoned the water supply. The most famous case of chemical warfare from the Greeks, however, comes from the Byzantine Greeks when they invented a petroleum-based substance that couldn't be extinguished with water and would be fired from tubes that were attached to Greek ships. What's so cool about that is the fact that no one has ever been able to recreate it. At number 9, hashtag roasted. I'm sure you've no doubt heard of the messed up punishment devices that have been used throughout history. I have to say that the people of the past were very creative when it came to coming up with ways to bring harm to others, and the ancient Greeks were no exception. I mean, they certainly weren't the worst when it came to their punishments, but they still were going a little overboard. One of their famously horrific torture devices was called the Brazen Bull. It was a large hollow casting of a bull made from bronze that had a door installed into the side of it. When someone was up for punishment via the Brazen Bull, they would be stuffed inside the statue, the door would be closed on them, and a fire would be lit under the bull, heating the metal statue. The person inside would then be sadly roasted alive. I would much rather be roasted on Twitter than inside this mighty metal bull, that's for sure. Before we carry on talking about the messed up things that went on in ancient Greece, why not take a moment to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, questionable relationships. The ancient Greeks had some pretty questionable habits when it came to the coming of age of young Greeks. The idea of a relationship between an older person and one who has not yet come of age was not only normal, but was encouraged. As part of the coming of age of young Greek boys, they would be part of a ritualistic kidnapping. Now don't worry, they weren't actually being taken from their beds in the middle of the night. This was more so an agreement made by the boy's father ahead of time, but either way, they would still be taken by an older person from the community, where they would be taken out into the wilderness and taught how to hunt, they would feast, and they would learn how to be an adult. They would later return to the community, where they would be given a choice of either severing ties with their adult partner or continuing their relationship with them. It's certainly a little unsettling the fact that this kind of thing was normal. At number 7, backwards logic. It was tough being a woman in ancient Greece. I mean, it's been tough being a woman at any time throughout history, and we're still fighting for our place in society on many fronts, but back in the times of ancient Greece, they had it really bad. Part of Greek society included the notion that women were objects, and as a result, the Greeks saw adultery as a worse crime than non-consensual relations. Now you're probably scratching your head thinking, why? And my dear viewer, I will tell you why they had this sort of backwards logic. You see, since women were considered to be objects and property, any kind of misconduct or mistreatment to a woman, especially one's spouse, this was considered to be almost like theft of this object, and so if found guilty, the person responsible for this injustice would be tried for adultery, not the real crime at hand, being the mistreatment of a woman. The punishment for an adulterer was quite severe, as when caught, they could risk being killed on the spot, and in the event of whatever affair, that would be grounds for an immediate divorce. At number 6, deformed males. Further on the topic of the presence of women in ancient Greek society, let's talk about how women were seen in their communities. Now, even though Aristotle was considered to be one of the greatest philosophers in history, his ideas were also quite flawed. During his life, he believed that women were deformed males who were created when, quote, something went wrong in their mother's wombs. unquote. They considered women to be so terrible that the philosopher Plato also warned men against being reincarnated as a woman in the next life, saying that this could be avoided if they had lots of success during their current lifetime. Because of this view on women, baby girls were often abandoned. Girls' education focused primarily on how to have and raise a family, and when girls were married off, they were considered to be property, like I mentioned in the previous number.
Number 5. Virgin Mary snakes. Okay, this one is a little strange, especially if you've got an issue with snakes. I pride myself living in Canada because we have so many few species of venomous snakes. I believe it's 4 to be exact. That's good. 4 is a good number. That's not a shot at Australia. I love you guys, but you've got too many. On the island of Cephalonia, there's an event that happens every year that resembles our Groundhog Day. Except it's not freezing cold out and we're not waiting hours for a small town mayor to tell us if he saw a groundhog shadow or not and to vote for him in the next election. On the 15th of August is the celebration of the Dormition of Virgin Mary. During the service in the Church of the Virgin Mary and Marco Polo, harmless little snakes appear inside around this church, and at the end of the day, they disappear. As legend tells it, it's because pirates showed up to the island, and thanks to prayer, some snakes showed up as well to chase off said pirates. Kind of a weird story. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, sort of, kind of, right? There's a connection there, sure. Number 4, Christmas boat. Christmas boat, oh Christmas boat, I'm full of turkey, I hope you float. Isn't that cute? That was cute. That was good. I don't know about you guys, but if you've been watching here for a while, you know that I love Christmas. It's my favorite holiday. I love the music, I love the joy in the air, I love spending it with the whole family, grandma and grandpa, the snow, I love it all. And especially the movies. I love Christmas movies. Christmas Vacation is my favorite. Least favorite, Polar Express. It's not as good as people think. I don't know why people keep telling me that. It's not that good. It's not Tom Hanks' best work. Well, what's always good is decorating the Christmas tree. Well, as it turns out, some places in Greece, they decorate the kavarki, which is actually a boat with Christmas decorations instead of a tree. I can go either way, but with the boat, there's less pine needles to clean up and less for the family pet to eat and eventually vomit on the Christmas tree. That happens every year. I swear I got a cat and it just does a little hairball on the little thing around the Christmas tree. The skirt, that's what it's called, the skirt. Anyway, number 3. Apocryphes. This is the big one, baby. It's the one all Greeks wait for, or at least so I'm told. She starts off with a big fat church meeting and then no eating meat. No, don't. The whole thing lasts weeks with a surplus of dairy, cheese, and wine consumption, which is just fine by me. Then the masks get busted out, kind of similar to Mardi Gras and other Western Christian celebrations of the sort. Hey, if there's ever some lovely Greek fans out there, Taylor, Adam, and I could go for some delicious Greek cooking. We're all hungry boys, just saying. There's also an assortment of parades that look pretty fun too, the biggest one being in Patra. So in a nutshell, it's Greek Mardi Gras, just less sin. Number 2, Clean Monday. This is where we clean ourselves up. It's the Monday that ends the festivities. Some of you may know it as Lent, but this is huge in Greece. This is where we give up all of our meat eating and we eat seafood. Because, you know, fish, that's not meat for some reason. Right? It's weird. But it's 40 days of repenting, letting go of your sin, and all the mischief of the festival that you may or may not have partaken in. No need to bring up how much wine I drank. But I guess every party has to come to an end, right? And coming into the number 1 spot today, we have plate smashing. Opa! Now how could I mention any Greek party or celebration without a plate breaking? It's been around for a long time, and how can you make this list without talking about plate smashing and Greek weddings? Any regular Greek wedding beats any of these holidays any day of the week. Enough food to feed an army, literally, music, dancing, and enough wine to sink a ship. All of this as soon as the bride and groom break the plate. It's beautiful. I love it. Shout out to the Danforth, you know what I'm saying? Number 10, hotel speed. Okay, picture this. You're young and in a hotel with your parents. Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a trip, or maybe it's a hockey game. Nice. Nonetheless, you find yourself in a long hallway with a strange looking carpet. Hotel hallways always have weird carpets, I don't know. Maybe it's the giant hamburger and milkshake you just ate. Maybe it's the hotel TV, or the excitement of just not being at home. But something has changed. You're different. Your powers have been amplified. For this corridor will be your personal racetrack. A shame Guinness World Records isn't here to clock you in at max speed, because for some reason if you fly down that hallway any faster, the rug would catch fire. Yes, the joys of running down a hotel hallway. This is probably how the first Olympians felt at the first Olympic Games. I'm comparing it to that for some reason, sure we'll go with it. Where the only event at these Olympic Games was running. Like many of the other events that would later come later on, this was done without clothing, which is fine. As long as you're, not doing that in the hotel hallway. Keep your clothes on. Number 9, WWE, brother. Only if you could have seen the look on my face when I discovered that wrestling in the WWE isn't as real as I thought it was. The shock, the confusion, and the loud ringing in my ear. It was pretty serious for me. I got really into it as a kid. Gave me some Vietnam flashbacks, seriously. You mean to tell me that there was an intricate planning into every hidden fall, every entrance, and every time we heard the sound of a steel chair connecting with someone's forehead? Oh man. As a kid, I never would have guessed that, but when the Undertaker walks in a room, you take notice. Those thoughts just go away. Sadly, the ancient Greeks did not have cage matches, turnbuckles, or personas based on hyper male confidence. What they did have, however, was some real wrestling, some bare knuckle, no clothes, oiled up kind of wrestling. Nice. Instead of a one leg up pin, a scoring system was used for when the opponent's body was on the ground. And I'm sure lots of people got injured in the process. No thanks. I'll stick to the cage matches. Number 8, Pankration. Here's another story for you. It might seem kind of silly, but growing up, I got to witness the birth of a mainstream sport. The UFC got its start in the early 90s, but blew up in the mid 2000s. Now, I'm not much of a sports guy. Besides major championship matches or games, I don't really watch any sports. I'm more of a film and video game guy, if you couldn't tell. However, my first interaction with the UFC was seeing an octagon-shaped ring, and my grade 2 geometry immediately kicked in and said, that's an octagon. Wow, okay, that's different. However, the second thing that I noticed is that this was not wrestling, and this wasn't boxing. It was kind of a mixture of both. Sort of a mixed martial art, if you will. Well, that's kind of what Pankration was. There was no indirect punching or kicking, but pretty much anything else goes. To me, this sounds like a good way to get injured. Kind of like wrestling before, now it's just even worse. And as I'm sure you all know, paper cuts can be lethal back then, so maybe not such a good idea. Did I mention this is done without clothes too? Everyone's naked. Number 7, the road trip. This isn't an Olympic event, but honestly, it should have been. Think about it for a minute. I want you guys to look out the nearest window right now. Get up, go ahead, look out the nearest window. Tell me what you see. You probably see a road with cars. When you need a fast food fix, it's as simple as getting in a car and driving on the road to your destination. Or getting it delivered with your favorite food delivery app. It's 2022, we can do a lot of crazy stuff now. What I'm getting at is that people from all over the Greek city-states came to Olympia to witness the first Olympics. Except, it would have been a triathlon just to get there. Frankly, my biggest fear, walking. That was the main mode of transportation, which after a while in those sandals was probably hell. Imagine trekking many, many miles by land and sea to only be exhausted to watch athletes become exhausted. Oh, I need some water just thinking about it. Woo. Number 6, peace. Peace. What's better than a good war? A better armistice, or at least I'd like to hope so. During these first Olympic Games, which on a side note, if I had a time machine and a scooter, I'd love to see firsthand. There was people and athletes coming from all corners of Hellenistic civilization, all Greek states and colonies. Well, sometimes these Greek states got caught up in these little things called wars. Who knew, right? But when the Olympics were on, a truce was called. Messengers were dispatched to announce the truce, which gave all the people traveling on their long treks safe passage. I also find it somewhat amusing that they did this all for one day. That's right, the events only lasted one day. Some folks did days of traveling only to have it all be over in 24 hours. The opening ceremony couldn't have taken that long either, so I feel like it's kind of a waste of time. Only if we got some of that peace right now. Russia is looking at Ukraine a certain kind of way, just waiting to act up. Bad Russia. Stay in your corner.
And while on the subject of their miraculous medicine, how about a medical mystery we may never solve? Were they colorblind? Interesting, I know. I hope I got your attention with this one because even I looked twice when I found the journal article on this. So this theory comes from a few historical sources and some historian opinions. According to Mark Bradley, associate professor of ancient history at the University of Nottingham, color operated in a very different way in history from what we use today. According to him, the Greeks viewed color as essentially as the visible outmost shell of an object. So fire wouldn't be red, it was fire colored. Dirt wouldn't be brown, it'd be dirt colored. The sky would be sky colored. Skin would be skin colored. They wouldn't talk in the terms of abstract color labels like blue, mauve, chartreuse that we use today. This explains why conversations of ethnicity don't show up much in ancient Greece. That's some context for you. Anyways, a great example is how Homer, in his famous works like the Iliad and the Odyssey, described the Mediterranean Sea as a wine-dark sea. Have you ever looked at the ocean and thought, ah yes, grape juice? Homer actually only names a few color terms and uses the same colors to describe objects that look quite different, such as comparing the color of a seagull to that of a bush. Two very different things. So if this theory is true, it would really suck to see the world in a little bit less color than we do now. Another mystery, but one to fear, would be the unknown plagues. Anyone who happened to be living in Athens in 430 BC had about a 25% chance of dying in a horrible, horrible way, and historians aren't really sure exactly what happened. So the basics are, it was during the Peloponnesian War, and Athens was under siege when an illness broke out. It's assumed the illness was brought by invading soldiers in their blood or in their mucus. It's very 2020 pandemic style. It lasted for around 5 years, and the death toll was catastrophic on top of the war. Most of what historians know about the plague comes from the writings of Athenian general Thucydides, and what he described isn't anything clearly recognizable as one particular plague or illness, rather a combination of symptoms of multiple deadly illnesses like smallpox or typhus. Victims suffered from fevers, bloody and swollen throats and tongues, and finally violent excrement that drained the last of the life out of them. In 2006, a study where DNA was collected from the teeth of ancient Athenians swiftly buried in mass graves suggests it was typhoid fever, but not everyone's convinced. Another recent suggestion was an outbreak of Ebola. Whatever it was though, it killed a lot of people in a really bad way, and this was just one of the plagues that hit Greece. This was the only mysterious one, however. Here's an annoying one that would make things suck 2 times a day. Imagine asking for the time and someone replying, which one? Well, aside from those who randomly have their cell phones set to 24-hour clock, this scenario usually doesn't happen, but it did in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks had 2 different concepts of time, using 2 different words, chronos and kairos. The former refers to time as we know it and measure it today, the chronological time. The latter signifies proper or opportune time for action. In other words, the right time to do something. In contrast to chronos, which is quantitative, kairos has a qualitative nature. Where there's a time, there's a place. Ancient Pythagoreans thought kairos to be one of the most fundamental laws in the universe. In Aristotle's scheme of rhetoric, kairos plays a very important role, as for him kairos is the time and space context in which proof will be delivered. One watch on each wrist, ladies and gentlemen, because one will tell you it's 4 p.m. and the other will tell you it's time to dump your girlfriend. And by checking your time for action watch, you may know if it's time to get pluck-ins. As you can probably guess from looking at the statues and other works of art they left behind, the ancient Greeks weren't a fan of bodily hair. To be smooth was to be the epitome of beauty, but whoever went for a wax in ancient Greece would have been in for a rough ride. There wasn't waxing solutions or razors. You sat there and plucked out every hair on your body one at a time. You could always burn your body hair off, that was a popular option, but I mean, you have your risks with that. Now strangely, less is more didn't apply to eyebrows, where people were trying to grow a literal bush. Monobrows were a highly desirable look to be prized or envied, so makeup and fake hairs were applied. Meanwhile for men, the smooth things still goes with exception to beards, which were a prestige symbol for men. Their grooming was of the utmost importance and also subject to competition between men, as all things somehow managed to be, which made the good hairdressers very sought after. Hear that? The bro bond between a guy and his barber? Ancient concept. So yes, while hair was considered by them to be the most valuable part of a human body that could be produced, and it gave the dead the power of their journey to the underworld, on the other hand, losing hair for ancient Greeks was not a negative thing. It was even their indication of wisdom, this being the reason most statues depicting philosophers are bald. And last but not least is Creighton's creation. I'm about to talk about something without talking about it. So, what did the Creightons create? A form of widely accepted and acknowledged kidnap, which then later evolved to become a consensual release by the father of a young man from his father's household to an of-age man who would be his guide to adulthood. In the Hellenistic world, it was accepted, hell, expected. It was always up to the older man to do the pursuing, and this is where the rooster comes in. Upon seeing the young man he'd like to guide, he would present him with a live rooster. In Greek society, this would have been seen as a gift hard to turn down, so few young men did, and so began the relationship. Think of the other name for a rooster, so this is kind of a really metaphorical gift. Anyways, traditionally, they would go out into the wilderness together so the young man may learn hunting, fishing, navigation, foraging, plant identification, and pore over poetry and literature. Later, the young man and his guide would return back to their home city, with the young man as a comrade to the man now, living with him in the city to learn manly responsibilities there instead of the back 40s. But of course, such relationships couldn't last. It was customary for the man to release his young companion as soon as the latter started to grow facial hair, which genetically is different for everyone, so some men got away easier than others. The young man could then either continue his relation with the guide or publicly denounce him for any misbehaviors that occurred during their time together, which might as well be the barest minimum punishment for an SA to have ever existed in human history, which is why it easily tops the lists of reasons why living in ancient Greece would have been impossible.
Number 10, Clash of the Titans. An Avengers level threat, baby. The Titans were the big bad giants who ruled over the earth and the gods. Naturally, they all got along, and there were never any problems, ever. Yeah, right. They fought like cats and dogs, though I never understood that because all the dogs and cats I know always got along great. But the Titans fought, and they fought some more, until your favorite boy Zeus had enough and kind of took control over everything. It's Zeus, it's what he does. It's too bad Aaron Yeager wasn't there to help out. Number 9, Prometheus. Poor Prometheus. This is my favorite tale from Greek mythology. I think it's rather sad for Prometheus. All he wanted to do was give us the knowledge of fire, and look at all the things that we did with it. Forged iron and steel, heated our homes, so no one would ever go cold again. And we cooked, which gave Gordon Ramsay 23 hit shows and a reason to curse when asking for the lamb sauce. Where's the lamb sauce? Prometheus went directly against Zeus's orders, and if you didn't know, that's kind of a bad thing. It can wind you up in a rather unfortunate position. A position like being chained up and having a large bird come feast on your intestines. Like I eat mom's spaghetti. She makes a good spaghetti. Thanks, Mom. You make a good spaghetti. Number 8, Icarus. I think we can all relate to this one, or at least have been told a version of this when we were flush. Things were going good for us. In a nutshell, Icarus got some wax wings and gained the ability to flight. Mind you, that was probably the dream of many ancient peoples. After Icarus got his wings, he got a little arrogant. He wanted to push his wings to the limit. Kind of like Iron Man in the first Iron Man movie. But instead of falling in a multi-million-dollar supersuit and looking handsome while doing it, Icarus sniffed one too many of his own farts and flew too close to the sun, where he burned up in it. So what's the lesson learned here, folks? Keep yourself grounded and don't sniff your own farts. Number 7, Jason and the Argonauts. Avenger level threat acquired. For some reason in our lives, you find stories of our favorite heroes forming almighty and powerful groups. The Avengers, the Justice League, BTS. That one might have too much power. But yes, Jason and the Argonauts were a band of heroes on adventures, slaying beasts, taking names, and Greekifying the area. Sadly, for Jason and the Argonauts, every time they try and make a movie about it, it just never works for them. I don't know. They had a visually impressive one in the 60s, and everything after that has just been a complete misfire. Hollywood, if your casting calls come my way, just know I make a great Jason. Look at me. I could be Jason. A sword, a shield, and there we go. That's it. Number 6, Hercules. Hercules, the strong one, or the one where Danny DeVito coaches him through the process of being a Greek legend. If Danny DeVito is coaching you through anything, that probably means you're gonna come out on top. And yes, before you start typing in the comment section, technically speaking, Hercules is the Roman copy of Heracles. I know. However, it's kind of one of those things that everyone just knows the one, so anytime a Greek dude shows up with muscles, you blush and you think of Hercules. As far as Greek mythology goes, it doesn't get any more classic than a super strong guy with abs and biceps, and maybe a little bit of olive oil on him, I don't know. Number 5. I had the high ground, Anakin. According to a disputable legend, however, given my semi-okay Palpatine impression, I had to include this on the list. Basically, Amdocles was a smart dude and had just earned himself a decent track record. He helped save people. Dude was credible. He gained somewhat of a following afterwards, almost to the point of worship. This may have gone to his head as he started to believe his own divineness and jumped into an active volcano, where strangely enough, he does not come out of it. Now I wonder what would have caused that to happen. Perhaps maybe he didn't have a certain galactic friend who was the Senate, the whole Senate and nothing but the Senate, and could shoot lightning out of his fingertips and help out of someone of the burning lava, yes. Number 4, manure burial. Heraclitus had edema, which is basically some bloating in the hands and feet due to excess water and fluids in the body. Not a big deal. Although sometimes in ancient times all diseases were serious because Well, in ancient times, frankly, a papyrus cut could be the difference between you attending the next celebration of town or taking a cruise down the river Styx. Heraclitus had a solution for this. As a learned man, he was never wrong. So what was his scientific medical solution to his ailment that might have gone away on its own? Well, he basically buried himself in manure so it would get rid of the excess water in his body. Yeah, I don't know how that works either. Unfortunately, he was attacked and eaten by wild dogs in his mud bath. He did not make it out. Number 3, Boys Club. Hypatia was a female philosopher at the Library of Alexandria, something that any archaeologist or historian would give their right kidney to witness in its glory. What's so scandalous about her, besides being a woman with knowledge that would scare a lot of men at the time? Things were alright until a Christian mob discovered she was a pagan. Well, this certainly could not stand, and in probably the weirdest assassination attempt ever, she was unalived by being sliced with clamshells. Or roof tiles. The translation gets a little lost. Regardless, we're not playing Clue here, so it doesn't matter if the Christian mob uses the shells in the library or not. The fact is, an intelligent woman who taught others was removed for no good reason. Number 2, Countrymen, lend me your ears. Zeno of Elea was a learned man, and in a rebellion against his leader Nearchus, he was captured and received the beating only a stepson would know. However, in Zenos' final act of defense, he asked Nearchus to come close so that he could whisper in his ear. And channeling his inner Mike Tyson, reeled back his head and came in to take a bite out of his ear like Scruff McGruff the dog takes a bite out of crime. Sure, he was victorious, but history tends to remember things like that. You got a page in a textbook somewhere, Zeno. Number 1, Zeus. Does this man deserve an introduction? Here's another topic that could honestly be its own video. Zeus, the god of gods, the man with all the power and the affinity for tossing lightning bolts the same way Gordon Ramsay tosses salads. But I'll just write them off for you. Turned his first wife into a fly and ate her. Constantly unfaithful to his other wives. Tied Prometheus to a rock and had his liver eaten by a bird. Wiped out humanity. Cursed a man to push a boulder up a steep hill for eternity. And made Atlas put the world on his shoulders. Shout out to my people in the audience who get anxiety trying to order a pizza over the phone. Now imagine you have to literally hold the whole world on your shoulders. Oh, too much pressure. Yes, I know Zeus is mythological, but a lot of others on this could be as well. This was a long time ago. Some documents just didn't live that long. Number 10, Dionysia. Okay, this one's pretty cool actually. The best way I could describe it is like it's a very old film festival, or how my friends and I treated the MCU movies. A bunch of my friends lived together and it was kind of like the House of Nerds. We were pretty cool, I swear. We all couldn't wait to get out and see the movies with who it seemed like every other person on Earth was also going to see the movies. The Avengers, they were pretty cool. That's what Dionysia in a nutshell is. Just less Captain America and no spandex. People would flock Athens to come watch plays in their huge amphitheaters. And oh, of course, just like all parties on this list here, there's gonna be lots of food and drink and wine. Can't have a showing without wine. Can't have that. Number 9. Kotobos. Well, in case you're wondering, yes, I have been to a few parties in my life. High school and college were times of great nights and even worse hangovers. Well, what can I say? I just enjoyed my time with friends and even strangers sometimes. And of course, I may or may not have had a few beer. That depends on if my mom's watching this video or not. I'm sorry, Mom. I also may have partaken in a few drinking games like Flip Cup, King's Cup, and my favorite, beer pong. You're looking at the basement champion here, folks, the number 1. You're looking at, I'm number 1, brother! Well, surprisingly enough, even in ancient times, the Greeks enjoyed drinking games. You wouldn't think. A game called Kotobos. The objective of the game was to swirl your cup around and throw it at targets. A lot of times inside the home. To me, it sounds like I'm going to need a towel for all that spilled liquid. I gotta clean up before Mom gets home or else I'll be in trouble. Number 8, frat parties. Okay, so given that they love to drink and party and as well as play games, it seems to make sense that the comparison of a modern day frat house is that of to the Greeks and the whole fraternity thing, their Greek names. What I'm getting at is sometimes the frat houses aren't the most well taken care of. Have you ever seen Animal House? Yeah, exactly, you know what I mean. Well, as it turns out, the ancient Greeks might have had some frat behavior themselves, besides the drinking games. And actually, besides wearing togas, I'm not sure if that was true or not. The Greeks would sometimes throw furniture around in their stupors. It's so strange, you just think of them being such educated wise men, not toga partying 70s animals, but here we are. Number 7, catch the cross. Here's a modern one for you that I think was pretty cool. Always learning here at Bumblebee. This is new for me. Catching the cross may sound like something you do at a wedding. Instead of a bouquet of flowers, you catch a little Jesus. There you over here, oh I want it. All jokes aside, this is one of the biggest celebrations of Orthodox Christians. Basically, it works like little weights your mom bought for the pool so you can practice diving. A priest throws a cross in a holy blessed body of water, and then young men from around all the village come and dive to retrieve it. Diving for weights was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. A cross? Sure, we'll go for it. We'll do it. Let's go. I'll dig up some Jesus. Let's go. Number 6, Ragutsaria. Halloween. North American children's favorite fall holiday. When I went to college, I made friends with a lot of international students, and for a lot of them, it was going to be their first Halloween that coming fall. It was a pretty cool experience to have their first with me. It was pretty cool. Who doesn't love Halloween? Personally, I prefer the costumes that were funny over scary, right? I've done so many funny things. Well, what if I told you that there's a similar holiday in Greece, just less Value Village costumes? In January, people in Castoria City wear scary masks and exorcise demons from the city. Who are you gonna call? Once all these spooky demons have been scared off, the masked people pass by where they sometimes receive coins for their ghost busting services. That's kinda cool. You wear a mask, go scare someone, and then you get a coin. There's a coin for you. Have a coin. I'll take the drachma. Do they still use drachma? No, it's euros, right? Number 5, athlete juice. Speaking of gross, this one is straight out of Johnny Knoxville's playbook. Shout out to those guys. I hope one day I'm cool enough and famous enough to meet them. Maybe do a bit. Chetty's knuckin' fut, so I'm down. Anyway, back to the Greeks. Remember when I said the Greek bodybuilders like to oil up? Well, so did the athletes. Here's where it gets gross. After days of events and running around in the dirt, naked with olive oil, these athletes wouldn't always bathe. But why? Well, the answer is marketing. Just like Gatorade commercials of the early 2000s, these athletes were covered in juice. This sludge was scraped off in what I'm sure was a very humanizing experience and jarred up to be sold like a superhero serum for the average Joe Schmo to drink or rub on themselves. This mixture was called Gloios. No thank you. I will pass. Number 4, Nocturne Totem. It was 2008. I was alone in the dark one summer night. There, illuminating my poor innocent face, was Call of Duty World at War, the latest action-packed Hollywood blockbuster FPS from Activision. Now, I always finish campaigns first before moving on to multiplayer. Just when I thought it was over, a new cutscene started playing, except this one was different. It was dark, and the camera was shaky. And that's when I saw them, twisted and screeching undead, sprinting at me. I have never turned off a console so fast in all my life. Well, it seems the ancient Greeks shared this fear as well. To prevent zombies eating their very smart brains, the Greeks oftentimes buried folks with heavy stuff on top of them, just to prevent them from climbing out of their graves. That's the smartest people on earth, and they think the zombies are gonna come get them. That's crazy. Guys, come on. Number 3, diluted wine. The Greeks were well known for their artisan goods and foods. Their wine is no different. Some good stuff out there. However, did you know that Greeks would dilute their wine with a little H2O? Drinking wine pure was sometimes considered to be an unholy act, as it was said it could make a man unruly. Well, they're not too far off from the truth on that one, actually. Drinking too much wine can make you go a little silly. So yeah, diluting it kinda makes sense. Sometimes during hot weather, if it was available, snow was added for a cool and refreshing drink on the hot Greek island days. That sounds kind of nice, kind of like an ice spritzer, a Greek ice wine spritzer. How nice, wow. Number 2, the finger. The ultimate hand gesture. I know you're gonna have to blur it out or not even put it in, but here we go. That's what I'm talking about. The ultimate hand gesture. It starts with a, "Hey, I'm walking here," and ends with a simple finger in the air. It's been used for centuries and will probably be used for many more. Ever wondered where the origins of the most powerful hand gesture besides Darth Vader's force choke come from? Well, the almighty gesture has its origins in ancient Greece. Who would have thought? While no one is 100% sure the exact origins of it, we know it was used back then and it was around. The very interesting Diagonies was known to use it against those passing by he was distasteful of. He didn't like a lot of people. Maybe it was because it was simple, phallic, or just kind of strange. But at the end of the day, we all know what it means. Number 1, mud bath. I know Steve-O has literally done something like this before, and if there's rules you should write this one down, this second, right now, write it down. Be kind to one another, and work hard in life. And never do anything ever that Steve-O has ever done. Those are really good rules. Trust me, it's good words to live by. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, in ancient Greece, for those who could afford it and had the time, they needed to relax. I need to relax. They needed the spa treatment. Heck, I've never even been to a spa. Someone take me. The ancient Greeks loved mud baths, and from what I hear, it's actually got quite a lot of benefits to it. However, the Greeks added one secret ingredient. One piece of the Krabby Patty formula I know most of us would say no to, even Plankton. Crocodile dung. Oh god, yes, that's right. They bathed in hot crocodile refuse. It's great for the skin, apparently. So much so, it was thought it had beautifying and restorative properties. Go ahead then. Jump right in, guys. Water's fine. Come on in. Number 10, Greek pyramid. Okay, so ancient Greeks. You got your beautiful women, olive oil, olives, togas, beautiful white buildings. I mean, come on, what am I missing here? Shout out to the Greek community, by the way. Chetty loves you, especially the Danforth. It's a Toronto thing. Well, what if I told you ancient Greeks built a pyramid? 2 to be exact. What? I know, right? They are nothing close to the size or the ones that are in Egypt, but that's okay. Nothing's gonna be like those because those ones are the best. More interesting than that is that we don't really know that much about them. They are notably in poor condition, and scientists are still speculating on who, what, when, why, and how. All we know is the where. It's in Greece. That's all we got so far. Kind of interesting though. You think pyramids are Egyptian, but no, they're in Greece too. I guess they're everywhere. Who knows? Anyway, number 9, Greek computer. The Antikythera mechanism. Ooh, I said that right, I hope. This sounds like something straight out of Call of Duty Zombies, but alright, I'll bite, I said to myself when looking at this strange contraption. In a nutshell, it's described as the oldest example of an analog computer, which is a fancy way of saying a basic or manual powered computer that calculates simple solutions and or outcomes. It might not sound like much, but to me it's pretty cool. I was born in a unique time. I saw home computers become mainstays in everyone's home, and then in the late 2000s become not even a second thought in everyone's home. By then everyone just had a computer. It's kind of crazy how far we've come. Sure, this machine was simple, but it makes us wonder what else may have been lost to time, and it's speculated that it was used for calculating constellations, dates, and stuff like that. Simple but very complicated. I know I can never build one. Pretty cool. Number 8, Greek cult, also known as the Eleusinian Mysteries. Super secret cult meeting with weird rules. Every generation has this. The Greeks had this, the founding fathers had the Freemasons, and we have anime. Anime North, right? No, I'm just kidding. I love you guys. I'm just joking around. Trust me, there's some crazy clubs out there, man. This cult was so mysterious that, well, the word mysterious kind of comes from that. It was all about Demeter and her daughter Persephone, and to join, you can't have unalive anybody. That was like the main rule. You can't have a rap sheet, bro. No rap sheet. Which, to be fair, is a good prerequisite. I wouldn't want anyone in my club to have that either. That's about where the info well dries up. We don't know that much about them. Kind of reminds me of the Assassin's Creed Templar stuff though. Just saying, it's kind of weird, kind of similar. Number 7, the first actor. Lights, camera, action. Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro, Leo DiCaprio, some of the best actors of our time. Marlon Brando would probably say he's the worst in some sort of weird humble brag, but that's just the guy he was. However, who was the first? Sisyphus, who jumped on the back of a wooden cart and began reciting poetry as if he was the character. Art. Today that would probably get you locked up in a rubber room, but back then it was art, thus inventing thespian theater. You gotta appreciate waking up one morning and just inventing a new art medium. Yes, I love to be in the back of carts. Number 6, the Colossus of Rhodes. Another one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is the Colossus of Rhodes, erected by Charles of Lindos in 280 BC. It was constructed to celebrate the successful defense of Rhodes City against an attack by Demetrius Poliorcetes. That's the best you're gonna get, folks. who had besieged it for a year with a large army and navy. According to modern descriptions, it was 33 meters high or 108 feet in American. During an Arab conquest in 653, she was completely destroyed and all her scraps were melted down or sold. Since 2008, there has been talk of rebuilding this beauty, and hell, I say why not? It would give me another reason to travel to Greece. I want to do traveling, baby. I want to get on my airplane for the first time. You know, and get on there. Maybe make a vlog of it. That'd be kind of cool, right? Number 5, tanks. Okay, so after a few Olympics, people got tired of walking those many miles just to see some dudes run a mile. We need more events, said the Olympic organizers, but what? We have athletes running, what else is there? Okay, I hear you. What if we get athletes to run, but with full military armor and gear on? Yeah, that's right. There was another race where athletes would wield the armor of the Greek soldiers and race. I can imagine that there was a clunking noise, or at least a lot of it, and also how difficult it must be to run in bronze armor. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Come a little closer. A little closer. A little closer. Whoa, too close. Bronze armor isn't good for chafing. Because let me tell you something, hot Mediterranean sun, not a lot of water, and running in hot metal attire? Someone's gonna have to come over and put baby powder on my bum bum. Number 4, the classic. I don't know why, but when I think of ancient Greeks, I think of grapes on the vine, marble, chariots, and the movie 300. It's kind of hard to forget those spray-on abs. Although someone could put them on me, it'd be kind of nice. Equestrian events were another event of the ancient Greek Olympics, and I have something nice to say about something for once. While every other event was dominated by males because, well, only males were allowed to compete, of course, the equestrian events allowed women. Nice! And naturally, ladies, when someone points the spotlight on you, you shine. A notable winner of the event was Sisyphus, a Spartan princess and athlete who was an excellent horse breeder. I guess that's a nice thing to be remembered by. According to some records, 2 monuments were built in honor of her victory. I rode a horse once. I can firmly say that I prefer the automobile. Just saying. You walk around like that, that's why all the cowboys walk like this. You just do that all that. Number 3, the long jump. After running in armor, it was discovered that jumping makes for a great Olympic event. How high? How far? It's simple, really. It should come as no surprise that I did not perform well in that section of track and field day at school. To my disadvantage, there was no strength-based events because it was considered unhealthy for us because we were so young. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. My counter to that argument would be, why are you making tubby kids run the 1500 meter? That's liable to have the kid with asthma writing his math test in the hospital bed later. I'd probably be joining him. However, I am a supporter of the ancient Greek jumping event. Basically, athletes gotta jump as far as they can whilst holding 2 large rocks. Now, if we did that today, people would know what it's like to do a long jump when grandma feeds you too much. Yeah, it's not easy. Number 2, the discus, the javelin, and the hammer. Sounds like a good band. Hey, these are all events that we still compete in today. That's awesome, but doesn't it make you nervous when the athletes are throwing those bad boys around? Especially the hammer throw. God, it just makes me so nervous. While I couldn't find an exact example of an accident happening, I doubt the ancient Greeks had safety in mind for spectators. The discus was made from stone or bronze, and they were tossing those suckers the same way Guy Fieri tosses Caesar salad. Which is a lot because he's kind of a big guy too. However, for me, it's the javelin that's most terrifying, as that was an appropriate weapon of war for the time, and athletes are just throwing them around like it's nothing. You're telling me the crowd was a safe distance away from the splash zone? Yeah, just keep your eye in the sky to be safe, folks. I don't know about that. Number 1, rap battle. Honestly, this is something we should bring back to the Olympics. While I was complaining about not being able to compete in strength-based events earlier, I, as a theater kid, would have much preferred some of the other less intensive events the ancient Greeks had up to offer. The ancient Greeks were not just chucking stones and chafing in bronze armor. There was also a competition with the arts. Poetry, song, and singing. Imagine if America entered Eminem into a rap battle contest. There would be no contest. Imagine if Canada entered one for musicians. K.D. Lang, Celine Dion, and Anne Murray just singing Angels.